Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring synchronicity. You know, those moments when seemingly unrelated events kind of align in a way that feels too meaningful to be just coincidence.
Right.
We'll be drawing insights from the book Synchronicity,
Yeah.
The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking Your Mind by Kirby Surprise and Alan Combs.
Okay.
Our mission, if you want to call it that, is to uncover the secrets behind these synchronistic events, or S's, as the authors call them. We're going to try to understand how they work and explore the mind-blowing possibility that we might be able to create them ourselves.
It's really fascinating, I think, this deep dive, because it's not just looking at these things. It's like, are we actually influencing them, and what does that mean?
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this a little. I mean, you've probably already encountered this concept of synchronicity before, these weird coincidences that make you stop and wonder if there's something more at play. But this book takes it to a whole new level. The authors start with a story that I think really perfectly illustrates the feeling. It's the story of M. Deschamps and his encounters with plum pudding.
Plum pudding.
Yeah.
It starts when he's a young boy, right? And he's enjoying this serving of plum pudding. He doesn't come across it very often. It's not like an everyday thing for him.
Right.
Years later, he's an adult now. He's in Paris. He's at a restaurant. He sees it on the menu, super excited, orders it, only to be told, oh, sorry, the last serving was just taken by another customer. And that customer, you guessed it, is the man who introduced him to plum pudding all those years ago as a child.
Wow. Okay, you might think, all right, that's a crazy coincidence, but, it's probably just random chance.
Yeah.
But hold on, there's more. Years later, Deschamps is at a dinner party, and guess what's being served?
What?
Plum pudding.
Oh, no.
He tells the guests about his previous encounters with plum pudding, and he jokes that the only person missing is that original plum pudding benefactor.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
No way.
And at that moment, a confused elderly gentleman enters the room. He's come to the wrong address. And it's the same man from the plum pudding encounters from his childhood.
This is wild.
I know.
3 encounters.
3 encounters across decades, all linked by this seemingly insignificant dessert.
Like, what are the odds?
I know. This story, though, it's not just about plum pudding. It highlights how some coincidences can seem so improbable that it makes us wonder, is random chance really the only thing at play here?
Right.
The authors argue that these kinds of SEs aren't just flukes. They could be connected to something deeper, something more profound. In fact, they propose something even more radical, that we all have this innate ability to create these meaningful coincidences. They say our thoughts, our emotions, memories, even our daydreams can be mirrored in the events around us as SEs.
Interesting. So they back this up with their own experiences.
Yeah.
Kirby Surprise recounts a time when he was sitting in his car daydreaming about telekinesis and focusing on this cottage that's nearby. And all of a sudden, as if responding to his thoughts, this cottage mysteriously flips onto its side.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, right? You might be thinking, well, couldn't this just be a case of, subjective interpretation? And of course, we can't totally rule out the possibility that our perceptions sometimes color our experiences. But it does raise a fascinating question. Could our internal world somehow influence our external reality?
It's such a compelling story. I mean,
Yeah.
whether or not you think it's like a true SE, it begs the question of how much our mind plays into what we perceive as reality.
Yeah.
It's like those optical illusions. The same image can be perceived in different ways. What we see depends on our perspective.
Exactly. And the authors take this idea even further. They connect this potential ability to create SEs to our evolutionary past. Like, think of an ancient hunter on the savannah constantly scanning for patterns. The ability to distinguish predator from prey based on the slightest movement in the grass was really crucial for survival.
Right.
And the authors suggest that this pattern-seeking ability also extends to our perception of coincidences. Just as our ancestors looked for patterns in nature for survival, we are wired to find meaning in these SEs.
So like a slight advantage in recognizing a predator could mean life or death.
Right.
Maybe even a small increase in the ability to perceive these SEs could have significantly impacted their survival.
Yeah, so we're not just talking about some mystical woo-woo concept here. The ability to recognize patterns, even seemingly random coincidences, could have given our ancestors a real advantage. And maybe we've inherited that same ability even if we don't consciously use it.
It's interesting to think that something we might just dismiss as mere coincidence today
Yeah.
could have been so valuable for them. Like maybe SEs were providing them with a way to anticipate danger or locate resources or even make decisions in a world where, knowledge and information were pretty scarce.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The authors argue that these SEs aren't some kind of supernatural phenomenon. They're actually a natural ability that we all possess. It's like we're unconsciously creating these meaningful coincidences all the time without even realizing it.
Huh. So they point to the use of rituals and symbols in ancient cultures as evidence. Think of like tribal shamans, right? Dancing in those stag masks, and they're trying to influence the hunt.
Yeah.
Well, we might not believe that that mask magically summoned the animals. Maybe those rituals were acting as a form of self-programming,
Yeah.
influencing the subconscious to become more attuned to certain patterns or opportunities that are related to the hunt.
Yeah, so maybe the stag mask didn't directly summon the animals. But what if those rituals helped the hunters focus their attention? Like, to become more aware of subtle cues in the environment that might lead them to prey. It's like uh, priming your mind to notice certain things.
Exactly.
Mm.
And this idea of influencing reality with your mind,
Yeah.
it's not just some mystical mumbo-jumbo. There might actually be some scientific evidence to back it up. They bring up the work of Dr. J.B. Rhine, who was a pioneer in parapsychology. He did research on ESP and psychokinesis at Duke University.
Yeah, those experiments where people try to influence the roll of the dice using just their minds. I mean, he found some pretty compelling evidence that people could actually influence these random events.
Right. Now, it's important to note that his work was controversial, and the scientific community still kind of debates the validity of his findings.
Yeah.
But the implications are pretty mind-blowing, right?
Yeah, totally. If we can influence even seemingly random events with our minds, it makes you wonder, what is the nature of consciousness? What is its role in shaping reality?
Yeah, yeah. It really challenges us to think about our minds. Like, are we just passive observers, or are we actually participating? Are we influencing the world around us, maybe even through SEs?
So are we basically saying that our thoughts and emotions are constantly creating these ripples of synchronistic events, and maybe we're missing these subtle reflections of our inner world because we're just not paying attention?
Yeah, that's a key concept they explore. We're bombarded with these reflections all the time, but we often filter them out. They don't fit our understanding of how reality works.
Right, right.
We're focused on the linear cause and effect way of thinking.
Yeah.
We tend to ignore the more subtle connections that could be, creating something richer and more meaningful.
Okay, but this raises a crucial question. If I'm starting to see all these SCs around me, does that mean I'm just delusional? There has to be a line between subjective perception and objective reality, right?
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and they address this. They share a story about a group therapy session. The topic was mind-reading technology. And at that exact moment, 60 Minutes aired a segment about brain scans that could identify thoughts.
That's wild. But it also illustrates how SEs can reinforce those existing beliefs, even if those beliefs are unfounded.
Exactly. That's where critical thinking and reality testing become so important.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between recognizing the significance of SEs and maintaining, a healthy skepticism. Like, are we seeing something real, or are we just projecting our own biases?
So how do we navigate that tricky terrain between genuine insight and delusion? How do we make sure we're not just seeing what we want to see?
That's a great question, and one that leads us into a fascinating exploration of how SEs have really shaped our understanding of the world, particularly in religion and spirituality. Maybe we can explore that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, let's do that. Welcome back to our deep dive on synchronicity. In the last part, we left off with this really interesting question. How do we tell the difference between genuine insights from SEs and, just being delusional? It's a question that's, kind of haunted humanity for centuries, especially when we think about the role that SEs may have played in the development of religious beliefs.
Right. The authors actually dive into this connection between SEs and religion. They look at how interpretations of these SEs have shaped spiritual beliefs throughout history.
Yeah.
They use this compelling anecdote about Emperor Wu of China and the monk Bodhidharma.
Yeah, you're probably already familiar with the idea that our interpretations of events, especially unusual ones, are, really influenced by our cultural background or existing beliefs, right? And the story of Emperor Wu and Bodhidharma really illustrates this. So the emperor, he's feeling pretty pleased with himself. He's been building temples, he's been copying Buddhist scriptures. He goes to Bodhidharma and he boasts about all the spiritual merit he's earned.
Yeah. But Bodhidharma offers a very different perspective. He basically tells the emperor that all those outward actions mean nothing
Yeah.
without genuine understanding, right? True merit, he says, comes from recognizing that everything is connected. That's where it comes from.
So the emperor's focused on, manipulating those external circumstances. He wants to earn these spiritual brownie points. But Bodhidharma is like pointing to something deeper. It's like an internal transformation, this direct experience that goes beyond any kind of religious dogma or ritual.
Yeah, and reminds me of the debate about, true spirituality. Does it lie in those outward acts of devotion or in cultivating inner awareness?
What do you think the authors are saying with this story, like about the relationship between SEs and spiritual understanding?
Well, they seem to be saying that SCs, while they can be really powerful catalysts for spiritual awakening, they can also be really easily misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Like if we just fixate on the outward appearance, like the emperor with his temples and his scriptures, we miss the deeper message.
Yeah, right.
So instead of viewing SEs as these signs or omens that require some external action, maybe the real wisdom lies in recognizing them as reflections of our own interconnectedness.
So it's not about trying to manipulate the SEs to get what we want, but more about using them as opportunities to deepen our understanding, like
Sure.
of ourselves and the universe.
Exactly. It's like shifting from a transactional view to a more relational one.
This concept of interconnectedness, I mean, it's a recurring theme in spiritual traditions all over the world. But here, the authors are suggesting that SEs might actually be a direct experience of that interconnectedness.
Yeah, it's like SEs aren't just these random things that happen, but maybe they're moments when that underlying fabric of reality becomes visible.
Right.
And it all connects back to the earlier idea that our minds might be more intertwined with reality than we realize.
Okay, but if we're all interconnected and our thoughts and emotions can, like, potentially influence reality, does that mean we're all, like, mini gods, bending time and space with our minds?
Well, it is a pretty radical idea, and the authors definitely explore it. They use these personal anecdotes and concepts from physics to explain how it might be possible.
Okay.
I know we're not all physicists, but they use real good analogies.
Yeah.
For example, imagine a flat piece of paper. That's our everyday reality. But what if that paper is folded? We can't see the folds, but they create these connections we normally wouldn't perceive. S's might be those glimpses into those folds.
Okay. Kind of like in those sci-fi movies where they talk about wormholes or alternate dimensions. Are we saying that SEs are evidence of this multidimensional reality?
Maybe. They talk about these thought forms that are created by our emotions and beliefs, kind of like concentrated bundles of mental energy.
Okay.
Think of them as ripples in a pond that emanate from our minds, and they interact with that fabric of reality. And maybe these thought forms, which exist beyond our normal senses, are what create the connections that we experience as SEs.
So we've got these thought forms rippling out from our minds. They're potentially influencing reality, and SEs are like the evidence of that. But like, how does it all work? If we can really bend time and space, how do we do it? Are there certain techniques?
Yeah, that's where the book gets really practical. They introduce this framework for understanding our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And then they offer these techniques for interacting with and possibly influencing SEs. They call them SE games.
Mm-hmm.
And they encourage a playful, experimental approach.
SE games. It's like turning life into this giant interactive experiment. I love that. But before we get into the games, I'm curious about their framework, for understanding SE awareness. I think it'd be helpful to know where we fall on the spectrum, right? Before we start trying to bend reality.
Right. So they outline these 4 stages of SE awareness: clueless, objective, subjective, and understanding. Think of them as levels in a video game.
Okay.
With each level, you get a deeper understanding and ability to interact.
All right, I'm ready to level up. Let's break down these stages.
Okay, so first we have the clueless stage. This is probably where most people start. Completely unaware of this concept of synchronicity.
Right.
They're happening all around them, but they're just not tuned in.
Yeah, it's like walking through life with blinders on, missing all those little winks from the universe.
Exactly.
I think we all probably been there at some point. So what about the objective stage?
So this is when you start to notice the coincidences. You're aware of them, but you're still viewing them from this detached external perspective.
Okay.
It's like watching a movie. You're observing, but you're not involved.
Yeah, they give the example of someone walking past a pet store and they see this beautiful white owl. And later that day, they step on a white owl cigar wrapper. It's a weird coincidence, but they don't see any personal meaning in it.
Right.
It's just a random event.
Yeah, you're acknowledging it, but you're not quite ready to, fully buy into it.
But what about those times when the coincidences feel a little more like pointed? A little too personal to be just chance. Like, what if someone turns on the radio and the first words they hear are, shifting gears? And at that exact moment, they're shifting their car into reverse.
Right, right.
That seems like more than just random chance.
Yeah, those are the moments that kind of crack open that objective perspective. You start moving towards subjective.
Okay.
And that's where you start to see SEs as reflections of your own thoughts and feelings.
So we start to feel like we're connected, like they're trying to tell us something.
Exactly.
And that can be a really exciting stage, right? Full of like aha moments and feeling this connection to the universe.
Yeah, it can be really exhilarating. Like you're in on the cosmic joke. You're finally, deciphering the code.
Yeah.
But the authors warn against getting too caught up in this. They emphasize that it's important to maintain that skepticism.
Yeah, it's like that saying, if you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If we're convinced that every coincidence is a sign, we might start seeing patterns that aren't really there.
Exactly. So it's about finding that balance, embracing the possibility, but not losing your grip on reality.
Right. So the subjective stage is like walking a tightrope between open-mindedness and critical thinking. How do we move from this kind of precarious stage to understanding? Like, what does it even mean to understand synchronicity?
Well, the author suggests that in this stage, you move beyond that linear way of thinking. You embrace a more holistic perspective. You realize that your own thoughts and emotions are actually the loom upon which, the tapestry of synchronicity is woven.
So instead of seeing SCs as isolated events, we see them as these interconnected threads, part of this larger pattern.
Exactly. It's like seeing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Everything is connected in ways that we don't always see. Essence are those glimpses into those connections.
So it's not about deciphering the meaning of each individual SE. It's more about appreciating the overall pattern, the flow.
Right, right.
And as we move towards that understanding, maybe we become more sensitive to, the subtle things we missed before. We start to see those connections that were always there.
And maybe even start to see your own role in shaping those experiences.
So it's not just recognizing SEs, it's recognizing our own agency.
Right.
And this leads us back to those SE games you mentioned earlier. Are these designed to help us move towards that understanding stage?
Exactly. They're practical techniques for interacting with synchronicity, for testing the boundaries of reality and exploring our own potential.
Okay. I'm excited to learn more about these games. Let's dive into those in the next part and see if we can level up our synchronicity skills.
Welcome back to our deep dive into synchronicity.
Yeah.
In the last couple parts, we were exploring those moments when it feels like the universe is winking at us with these with these meaningful coincidences, and we dove into this idea that these SEs might be more than just random events. They could be like glimpses into this interconnected nature of reality, and maybe even reflections of our own thoughts and emotions. But this deep dive isn't just about understanding SEs. It's really about exploring the possibility that we can actively participate in creating them. So let's get into those SE games we mentioned and see how we can play with synchronicity.
Yeah, these EC games, as they call them, they really offer these practical techniques for testing, the boundaries of reality and exploring our own potential for influencing these coincidences.
They encourage a sense of playfulness, like approach it like you're playing a game with the universe.
I love that. It takes the pressure off a little bit. You can approach it with curiosity, with a sense of wonder, instead of feeling like you need to have all the answers. So what are some of these games? How do they actually work?
Well, one of the simplest ones is called Hello Universe. It's really simple. You basically send out a mental hello to the universe, and then you just you pay attention. You notice any unusual coincidences or anything that happens in the following hours or days.
So it's like you're sending out this mental ping and seeing what kind of echo comes back.
Yeah.
What kind of responses should we be looking for?
I mean, it could be anything that feels significant to you. Maybe it's a song on the radio that reflects your mood. Maybe it's a chance encounter with someone who has information you need, or even just a series of events that line up in this way that feels too weird to ignore.
Yeah. You know, what's really fascinating to me about this is that it encourages us to kind of shift our perspective, from passive observation to actually participating.
Yeah.
We're not just waiting for the synchronicities to happen. We're actually engaging with the universe. We're inviting it to play along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about, cultivating that sense of play. Like we might actually be able to influence things in subtle ways. Another game they suggest is called co-occurrence.
Hmm.
And this one involves you know, framing your interactions with SEs as if you're communicating with some kind of benevolent force that's out there.
Okay. So it's like you have this cosmic pen pal, who's speaking to you through these coincidences.
Yeah.
It reminds me of those ancient divination practices, where they would look for signs and omens in nature, but instead of interpreting these signs as fixed predictions, we're engaging with them like it's an ongoing dialogue.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this game encourages us to see like every interaction
Hmm.
as an opportunity to
Yeah.
to tap into that. Like
Uh-huh.
even your interactions with other people.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. It's like turning our everyday lives into a giant treasure hunt, You're looking for clues, you're decoding this secret language. But with all this emphasis on subjective interpretation, how do we avoid like confirmation bias, Seeing what we want to see, ignoring anything that doesn't fit.
Right? That's where discernment comes in. They
Mhm.
they really emphasize that these games should never be a substitute for critical thinking,
Yeah.
or common sense. It's about finding that sweet spot between, being open-minded and being skeptical.
Right. So it's not about blindly believing that every coincidence is a sign, right? It's about being aware of the ones that feel meaningful.
Yeah.
And then exploring those with a discerning mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
And one way to do that, to cultivate that discernment is to really pay attention to how we feel,
Yeah.
our emotional responses to these SEs.
Right.
If a coincidence triggers this strong emotional reaction, that might be a sign that it's something worth paying attention to.
Yeah. They even suggest keeping a journal,
Mhm.
to keep track of the events and how you're feeling.
Yeah. That's great advice. It's like we're turning our lives into these living laboratories,
Mhm.
You're carefully observing and documenting your experiences. Over time, you might start to see these patterns or these recurring themes or even like subtle shifts in your perception of reality.
And those patterns might give you some insights into your own, subconscious beliefs, your
Yeah.
fears, your desires. It's
Mhm.
like your subconscious is trying to talk to you
Yeah.
using this language of synchronicity.
So these games aren't just about playing with the universe. They're also about playing with our own minds.
Yeah.
Exploring the hidden parts of our consciousness and its potential for shaping things.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. It's like recognizing that we're not just passive observers. We're active participants. We're co-creating.
As we wrap up our deep dive into synchronicity, I'm just left with this sense of awe and wonder. This exploration has really it's opened up a whole new way of seeing the world for me. It's a world that's full of these hidden connections, and meaningful coincidences and the possibility that we might be more interconnected than we ever imagined.
And it really invites us to pay attention to those subtle things we might have missed before, and to engage with the universe, be
Mhm.
playful with it, and
Yeah.
just explore what it means to be a co-creator.
If you've enjoyed this deep dive into synchronicity, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book Synchronicity: The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking Your Mind, and explore these concepts further. And who knows, maybe you'll experience a few interesting coincidences on your way home today. Keep your eyes open, keep your mind receptive, and embrace the mystery.